What if you are already in the top 1% of XRP, XLM, or HBAR holders without even knowing it? That is what I will reveal by the end of this video, and I don't mean it as a motivational line. I mean it as a literal, data-backed statement about how the rich list actually works, who shows up in it, who doesn't, and why the real number of people sitting in elite holder territory across these three networks is dramatically larger than the on-chain numbers suggest. Let's start with the data foundation, because everything in this video is built on verified sourced numbers, and I want you to be able to check every one of them yourself. XRP, the XRP ledger, has approximately 7.85 million activated wallet addresses as of the first quarter of 2026, up roughly 30% from about 5.97 million in late 2024. Across all those wallets, the confirmed percentile thresholds from multiple independent trackers, including XRP Scan, MEXC, KuCoin, and OSL's published analysis, give us the following. Top 10% requires holding somewhere between 2,200 and 2,301 XRP at today's price of roughly $1.05. That's between $2,310 and $2,416. Top 5% requires between 7,745 and 8,000 XRP. Top 1% requires 46,323 and 46,521 XRP. At today's price, the top 1% entry point is approximately $48,639. XLM circulating supply, approximately 34 billion tokens, total wallets across the Stellar network. Approximately 10.8 million, with AMIOL.com tracking roughly 90% of all wallets holding under 100B XLM. The top 1% sits in the tens of thousands of XLM range, and the top 10% starts somewhere in the low thousands. The precise published data is less clean than XRP's, but the shape of the distribution is confirmed. HBAR total accounts 9.78 million, top 10% threshold confirmed at 1,200 HBAR for March 2026 community analysis. At today's price of roughly 9.2 cents, that's $110.76, top 1% threshold confirmed at 30,000 HBAR. At today's price, that's $2,760. Three networks, 3 distributions, 3 entry points for the top 1%. Now here's the part that most rich list coverage skips entirely, and it's the thing that makes the title of this video accurate rather than just a hook. How many people globally own XRP? The answer from KuCoin's March 2026 analysis, cross-referenced with BitGet's mid-2026 data, is between 18 and 25 million unique human beings worldwide. 18 to 25 million people own XRP in some form, but the XRP ledger only shows 7.85 million activated wallet addresses. The math doesn't add up, and the gap is the whole story. The reason for the gap is how most people actually hold their XRP. Before we continue, if you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Now, let's get back to the topic. When you buy XRP on Binance, on Coinbase, on KuCoin, on any major centralized exchange, your XRP does not appear as your own wallet on the XRP ledger. It sits inside the exchange's single omnibus wallet, alongside the deposits of potentially millions of other customers. Binance's XRP cold storage wallet, one address, holds XRP on behalf of an unknown number of individual users. None of those individual users appear anywhere on the public rich list. None of them are counted in the 7.85 million wallet figure. They own real XRP, It's just custodied by the exchange rather than held in their own private keys. This means that the rich list percentile thresholds, the 46,000 XRP puts you in the top 1% figure, is calculated against 7.85 million wallets, not against 18.25 million actual human owners. If you calculate the top 1% of 25 million human beings rather than 7.85 million on-chain wallets, the number of people in the top 1% jumps from about 76,000 to 250,000, and the implied threshold for what it means to be in that top 1% of actual human beings rather than on-chain wallets would be a very different number than 46,000 XRP. Here's the specific implication that I think genuinely matters and is normally not stated as directly. If you are one of the 18 to 25 million global XRP holders and you are holding through a centralized exchange account rather than a self-custody wallet, you don't appear on the XRP ledger rich list at all. You are invisible to the on-chain data, but your ownership is real, and depending on how much you hold relative to the true distribution of actual human beings across those 18 to 25 million owners, you might be in the top 1% of all real human XRP holders without a single XRP ledger wallet addressed to your name. Let me make this even more concrete. 45% of all XRP ledger wallets, roughly 3.5 million wallets, hold under 100 XRP. Another significant portion holds under 500 XRP. The distribution of wallet addresses is heavily skewed towards tiny holdings, which is what keeps the top 10% threshold as low as 2,200 XRP. But this is the distribution of on-chain wallets. Thank you. Actual human owners includes all the exchange-based holders who never created a ledger wallet, but have real positions, and that group likely skews towards larger, more intentional positions, simply because they went through the friction of setting up an exchange account and making a deliberate purchase. Someone who bought 5,000 XRP on Coinbase last year holds it there and has never thought about moving it to a self-custody wallet. Doesn't appear anywhere in the XRP ledger data. Their 5,000 XRP position, which would put them between the top 10 and top 5% of on-chain wallets, is completely invisible to the rich list. But the ownership is real. They are, by any reasonable definition, an elite XRP holder relative to the full population of all humans who have any XRP exposure at all. Now, let's apply this same logic to XLM and HBAR, because the picture is different for each and the differences matter. For XLM, Stellar's network has approximately 10.8 million accounts, and the total number of unique global XLM holders, including exchange-based ownership, is harder to pin down precisely than XRP's. But by any reasonable estimate, it runs significantly higher than 10.8 million. Similar to the pattern we see with XRP, the 90% of Stellar wallets holding under 100 XLM includes an enormous number of effectively dormant accounts. Accounts created through promotional campaigns or exchange signups that were never meaningfully built into. If you are holding 50,000 XLM through a deliberate, thesis-driven accumulation strategy and you understand why Stellar's institutional partnerships with Visa, PayPal, DTCC, and the OpenUSD Consortium make this a specific considered bet, you are almost certainly in a meaningfully elite tier relative to the full population of actual XLM holders. Exchange-based and on-chain combined, even if you don't appear anywhere on the published rich list rankings. For HBAR, the picture has an additional layer that makes the secretly elite argument even stronger. The confirmed top 10% threshold is $1,200 HBAR, worth about $111 at today's price. The confirmed top 1% threshold is $30,000 HBAR at today's price. That's $2,760. These numbers are calculated against 9.78 million total accounts, but the daily active wallet count for HBAR sits somewhere between 2,000 and 18,000 per day. The vast majority of those 9.78 million accounts are dormant, created through exchange signups, promotional distributions, early curiosity purchases, and other mechanisms that put tiny or zero balances in wallet addresses that were never touched again. The active portion of the HBAR community, the people who are actually engaged with the thesis, tracking the enterprise partnerships, watching the Protocol 27 upgrade, watching the ETF inflow data, is dramatically smaller than 9.78 million. And the people watching this video, the ones who found HBAR through research and built a real position, are almost certainly sitting in a far more elite tier relative to the engaged community than the raw percentile numbers suggest. Now, I want to add one more dimension to this that I think is genuinely the most useful, practical takeaway from this entire analysis, because I don't just want to make everyone feel good about their position without connecting it to something actionable. The reason more people are secretly in the top 1% than the data shows is not a reason to feel comfortable and stop accumulating. It's actually an argument for the opposite. Here's why. Every person currently holding through an exchange account who then moves their XRP, XLM, or HBAR into self-custody wallet becomes visible on the on-chain rich list for the first time. They activate a wallet, they add to the total account count, and as the total account count grows, the percentile thresholds gradually drift upward, meaning the coin count required to maintain a top 1 or top 10% position slowly increases over time. The on-chain wallet count for XRP grew 30% in roughly 18 months. If that pace continues and eventually more of those 18 to 25 million global XRP holders move towards self-custody, the top 1% threshold of 46,000 XRP today could become 60,000 in 2 years, and then 80,000 simply because the denominator keeps growing as more people bring their holdings on chain. The people who benefit most from understanding this dynamic are the ones who are currently at or just below meaningful thresholds and have a specific reason to care about maintaining their tier position. Moving from exchange custody to self-custody doesn't change how many coins you own, but it does make your position visible on chain, and it does mean you're competing against a genuinely growing pool of activated wallets for each percentile position going forward. There's also a completely separate reason that more people are in elite territory than the data suggests, and it's the one that I think matters most for XLM and HBAR specifically. Rather than XRP, the institutional holder category, when Goldman Sachs disclosed $153.8 million XRP ETF position in its fourth quarter 2025 filing, that position doesn't appear as a single Goldman Sachs wallet on the XRP rich list in the way most people would imagine. It appears as part of an ETF custodian's aggregate holdings, likely inside a much larger pooled wallet that represents multiple institutional participants. The T. Rowe Price Active Crypto ETF that received approval just days ago, the one that can hold XLM, represents another category of institutional exposure that will exist somewhere in the network data in a way that it's not intuitively obvious when you look at the raw rich list rankings. What this all means is that the holder distribution for each of these three networks is simultaneously more concentrated and more broadly distributed than the on-chain data alone makes it appear more concentrated at the very top because the exchange omnibus wallets and institutional custodians aggregate enormous amounts into single addresses, more broadly distributed because the 18 to 25 million real human owners of XRP and the comparable, though less precisely counted, real owners of XLM and HBAR are not all visible on-chain and include a significant population of genuinely deliberate, thesis-driven accumulators who are invisible to the published rich lists. So here's the summary of what watching this actually revealed. Going back to the question I opened with, are you already in the top 1% of XRP holders without knowing it? If you're holding through an exchange account rather than a self-custody wallet, you don't appear on the on-chain rich list at all. Whether you're in the top 1% of actual human XRP holders globally depends on whether your position is above the threshold that would result from calculating that percentile against 18 to 25 million real people rather than 7.85 million on-chain wallets. That threshold is almost certainly lower than 46,000 XRP when you account for the full population of real human owners. How much lower, nobody can say precisely, because the full distribution of exchange-based holders isn't publicly visible, but the direction is clear. For HBAR, the confirmed top 1% threshold of 30,000 HBAR at $2,760 is among the most accessible elite holder thresholds of any top 20 crypto asset. If you're holding anywhere near that level through deliberate accumulation, you are almost certainly in the top 1% of HBAR holders by any reasonable count of actual engaged participants, regardless of what the 9.78 million total account base implies. For XLM, the combination of 10.8 million accounts with 90% holding under 100 XLM means that virtually anyone who has built a position beyond a few hundred XLM through deliberate accumulation is in a more elite tier relative to all actual holders than they probably assume. The real takeaway isn't your position is bigger than you think. Relax. The real takeaway is your position is meaningful relative to the actual community of real holders. The institutional validation behind these networks is real and growing, and the people who move from comfortable ignorance about their tier position to deliberate awareness about where they sit and where they want to be are the ones who make the next accumulation decision with actual information rather than vibes. If watching this actually changed was your understanding of how the on-chain wallet count relates to the total population of real holders, and why that gap makes secretly elite a factual statement rather than a motivational one, hit like on this one. It genuinely helps put this kind of honest data analysis in front of more people who deserve it before their next decision. Subscribe if you want this level of sourced cross-network analysis tracking as these distributions keep evolving. Because both the XRP wallet count and the HBAR account base are actively growing, and the thresholds are going to shift. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, did you know before watching this that your exchange-based holdings might not appear anywhere on the on-chain rich list? And does knowing that change how you think about moving towards self-custody? And if you know somebody who's been dismissing their XRP, XLM, or HBAR position as too small to matter without ever looking up where they actually sit in the real distribution of human holders, send them this one. Have a great day. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to join my free Telegram community with the link on my channel where I post my daily crypto experience and arbitrage opportunities you can't get anywhere else. This is XRP Hobart signing off.